So Dan was supposed to make an episode this week, but he was too busy playing Skyrim to make an episode, and so I was going to make one instead, but I was too busy playing Skyrim too. So sharpen your sword and grab your shield and let's take a look at Skyrim. So I'm not usually big on calling spoiler warning in my episodes because, well, I'm kind of a prick, but I am going to call spoiler warning here because the game is fairly new. So, warning, there will be spoilers, big spoilers, because we're going to be looking at the main quest. Now, the reason for that, even though this is a fairly open-ended game, the main quest defines the central conflict for the game world, and even if you as a player would rather be off mining or in Markarth, the main quest should still provide a solid narrative arc with your character as protagonist. In Skyrim, you play a condemned criminal facing the execution block. The nature of your crime is poorly defined, and you might be innocent, but the Empire isn't too picky about due process. Luckily, a dragon shows up and torches the place before they give you a neck-up haircut. As you escape, you team up with either the lovably racist rebels or the lovably totalitarian Empire. This scenario is inherently hilarious because it means running to safety with the guy who gave you a death sentence for loitering. Everyone's freaking out about the dragon because, in theory, dragons don't exist. They're all supposed to be extinct or imaginary, but imaginary friends don't burn down villages. All in all, you escape the village and run away to the nearby town of Riverwood, where you learn more about the lovable racists and/or the lovable totalitarians. Since a dragon attack is kinda big news on any day of the week, your new friends send you off to the regional seat of government, Whiterun, which is run by whites. The big pimpin' Jarl Belgriff tells you to run the news by his court wizard, who says that he can help if you go recover an artifact that may or may not exist. This is just an in-game setup to expose your character to his destiny, which is sort of like being exposed to Cesium-137. Probably fatal, but it's a fictional world, so instead you get superpowers. Or, in this case, you get a word of power that you can't use because they want to set the actual reveal up in a different way than just using a funky glowing wall. So you return with the rock just in time for a dragon to attack the Western Watchtower. Unlike the typical video game, the Jarl actually rallies some troops instead of sending you to do the job alone. After you and your dirty riding crew kill the dragon, you go all Highlander and devour its soul. Mechanically, this gives you the currency you need to buy the ability to use the word you learned off the wall from the dungeon with the rock. In story, it's explained that you must be Dovahkiin, or Dragonborn, because you have the natural ability to drain power from dragons and learn to use their words of power, and the Greybeards have summoned you up to High Hrothgar at the top of the throat of the world to check you over and see if you're the real deal. The Greybeards are a sect of pacifist monks who dedicate their lives to learning the draconic words of power in order to become one with creation. Most of this is explained in bits and pieces by a bunch of different NPCs over the course of a couple hours of gameplay. And actually, this is a good time for an interlude to talk about pacing. A lot of modern games try to emulate other narrative formats, namely movies, in terms of the flow of information and how much time there is between plot points. Games are inherently slower paced than film because even if what you're doing is advancing the plot, you typically have to do things in real time. Games can't compress time without taking control away from the player, so if they want you to climb a mountain, then they either take control away and do it in a cutscene, or you have to climb a mountain. Incidentally, Skyrim wants you to climb a mountain. When you finally get up to High Hrothgar, the monks run you through a few tests to see if you're the real deal, and then, after you demonstrate your savant-like ability to master ancient arcane techniques in seconds, as only the Dovahkiin can, they send you off to pick up some old trinket from a tomb because, I don't know, I guess the prophecy says the Dovahkiin has working legs. I guess climbing a mountain wasn't proof enough? Whatevs. The pacifists want you to go kill peeps, that's cool. When you get the horn, instead, you find a note saying that you're too late, meet me at the Riverwood Inn. This just further goes to prove that the Greybeards were probably hoping you'd just die and stay out of their hair, since someone else was able to recover the horn anyway, and they aren't the Dovahkiin. It's cool though, since the thief turns out to be Delphine, a hot warrior lady conspiracy nut. She even has a panic room built into her inn. She's got a theory that the dragons aren't just returning, they're being resurrected, and she wants you to prove that you're the Dovahkiin by murdering a dragon after it gets up from the grave. Sure enough, the dragon's being resurrected by the first dragon from the beginning of the game. That dragon, named Alduin, taunts you for a bit and then flies off to do some more evil, and you kill the other dragon before he even got to see sunrise again. Back at Delphine's crash shack, she's convinced that the Thalmar are behind the dragon invasion because they're trying to take over the world and want the Empire to be too weak, trying to split attention between dragons and the rebels to defend against an invasion. To confirm this, she asks you to sneak into a party at the foreign embassy in the capital and snoop around a bit. She gets you a ticket to the party and hooks you up with a mole who will sneak your stuff in. He tells you to bring only the absolute essentials for a stealth mission. So, of course, I packed my robot armor, sword, shield, a dozen potions, scrolls of mass paralysis, scrolls of hysteria, backup weapons, lockpicks, and proceeded to murder every last elf I ran into and strip the place clean of valuables. All that, and you find out that the Thalmar have no idea what's going on, but they name drop an old friend of Delphine's from back in Nom. Fetch him from his rat hole, and he leads you to Skyhaven Temple, where Alduin's wall spells out the big story. Alduin was an ancient badass who ruled the world with an iron fist, but some humans were taught the language of the dragons and used it to craft a word of power to kill dragons called Dragonrend. They defeated Alduin, but the prophecy said he'd come back someday to end the world unless the Dovahkiin stops him. That starts a long segment where you get sent to a lot of different places to find bits and pieces to assemble this super weapon of a word. Greybeard sends you to the top of the mount to speak to a dragon, who sends you to the Mages Guild, who sends you to their librarian, who sends you to their insane colleague, who sends you to an ancient ruins, who sends you back in time, yada yada yada. The overall plot doesn't really advance all that much during this time, but there is a really interesting segment where you talk with Parthenax, the dragon at the top of the mountain, and he gives you some long lectures about the nature of words and how knowing words and their meanings changes you. He also suggests some interesting philosophy about the end of the world, and implies that the job of Dovahkiin and Anduin is to end the world with their conflicts so that the next world can sprout from the remains. Unfortunately, this element doesn't pay off mechanically in the game, since there's never a big button you can push that says start the apocalypse. In fact, the rest plays out really straightforward. You confront Anduin on top of the mountain, kick his ass, he runs away, you capture his friend and convince him to betray Anduin, he flies you to Anduin's secret hideout where you run through a portal to the afterlife, recruit the ancient heroes that invented Dragonrend, kick Anduin's ass for good, return to the land of the living where some dragons stare you down, then fly off, and that's it. Just you and the wind on top of a mountain. And that's when I realized how badly I'd screwed up. Skyrim doesn't have a narrative arc because real life doesn't have a narrative arc. There's stories and mini-arcs, but there's no final victory lap. There's where you start and where you end and everything else in between. You killed Anduin, awesome, but the world is still a messed up place. The rest of the dragons aren't going to lay down arms just because you killed their boss, and the whole province is still on the brink of civil war. Everyone else had their things to get done, and since the world didn't end, most people won't even notice that you saved it. Ultimately, it's not about narrative arc because the main quest is just a running theme, a goal in a long checklist that introduces you to new threads, new people, and new places. The Civil War, the Mages Guild, the Thieves Guild, the Daedra Princes, the Dark Brotherhood, the Forsworn Uprising, werewolves, vampires, brigands, dragon shrines, and a million other errands and tasks. In the end, Skyrim managed to tell the kind of story that literature or film never can. One that doesn't end. Also, you get to slam a dragon in the face. Boosh!